The stars were dying. One by one, their light guttered out across the gulf, leaving only cold embers and the ghost glow of nebulae long since stripped bare by war. Vast spires of ancient orbital cities drifted without power, their windows black, their engines silent, their populations nothing but dust in the vents. The galaxy had become a graveyard lit by the flicker of failing suns, and through its corpse lanes crawled fleets carrying the last scraps of the Emperor's dream. This was the age of endings, where empires were not broken in a single blow, but bled dry over millennia until they were hollow shells pretending to be what they once were. And now, the greatest of them all, the Imperium of man, stood on the knife edge between survival and oblivion. We truly love and care for you, dear listener, and it is for you that this story will be told, not merely of battles and victories, but of the wounds no armor can shield against, and the shadows no blade can cut. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee, and let's get started. Across the galaxy's wounded heart yawned the cicatrix maledictum, the great rift, a warp-born scar so vast it split reality in two. From its depths spewed every horror the galaxy had ever whispered about, and many more it had never dared imagine. Civilizations that had endured for 10,000 years were swept away in weeks, and the Emperor's realm was severed from itself, unable to speak, unable to aid. From this darkness strode him, Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the 13th Legion, son of the Emperor, reborn after a slumber of 10,000 years in stasis. The warp's tides had not touched him, nor had the centuries bowed his frame. He stepped into this new age as he had left the old, tall as a god, mind as precise as a master's blade, his very presence bending the will of men and angels alike. Yet behind his eyes lay the haunted knowledge that time had moved on without him. He had fought beside the Emperor himself. He had built an empire of reason, order, and unity. And now, before him, stretched an Imperium twisted into a fanatical theocracy, ruled not by logic or law, but by fear and superstition. His father, once the pinnacle of human vision, was worshipped as a corpse god chained to the golden throne. The Primarch felt no warmth in the hymns sung to this deity, only the cold weight of a dream corrupted into its own prison. The Lords of Terror had summoned him to save the Imperium. The Adeptus Mechanicus pledged their forges. The fleets of 1,000 chapters rallied to his call. The common people looked upon him with awe and desperate hope. But Guilliman knew the truth. He was not returning to a realm that needed saving. He was returning to a realm that could not be saved. The voices around him spoke of a new golden age, the Indomitus Crusade, a march across the stars to reclaim what was lost. But even as the words took form, Guilliman's mind whispered questions he dared not speak aloud. Could such an empire be worthy of salvation? Could such a galaxy ever be made whole? And was it loyalty to save a thing that had become so alien to its own founding purpose? His first steps into the War Council were silent, his armor's ceramite whispering like the shifting of continents. Around him, banners of 100 regiments swayed in the recycled breeze, some still stained from recent campaigns. They were ready for his orders. They would march into the warp if he commanded. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous truth of all. Men and angels alike would follow him into damnation if he dressed it in the language of victory. Outside the viewing decks of the Macrage's honor, the great rift burned like a titanic wound in reality. Guilliman looked into it and saw more than enemies. He saw the reflection of the Imperium itself. Both were vast, Both were beautiful, in a way, and both were utterly, irreparably broken. In the depths of his mind, where no mortal ear could hear, he swore the vow that would shape the years to come. He would march the Indomitus Crusade into the heart of the darkness. He would bind the Imperium together again, no matter the cost, and when that was done, would decide for himself whether it deserved to endure. The galaxy trembled. The crusade had begun. The Macrage's honor hung in high anchor over the fortress world of Nemea, its vast silhouette eclipsing half the dawn. Below, the planet's surface glowed faintly from the scars of recent war. Smouldering city wrecks, oceans turned grey with ash, forests burned to nothing but blackened toothpicks jutting from the soil. The sky was a haze of dust, so thick that the sun rose not as a blaze, but as a dim red coin smudged by smoke. In the strategium at the ship's heart, the air was heavy with incense from the Mechanicus priests, mingled with the faint scent of recaf and machine oil. A vast holomap of the galaxy shimmered above the council table, its once familiar disk fractured by the jagged gulf of the Great Rift. The cicatrix glowed in crimson fire across the projection, a scar so immense that even here, reduced to a model, it seemed to pulse with malign will. The War Council had assembled. The Lords Militant stood beside chapter masters in their polished plate. Magi of the Mechanicus loomed in crimson and bronze, their mechadendrites whispering over data scrolls. Inquisitors lurked like shadows with eyes, their rosettes glinting coldly. Across the circle were mortal admirals, fleet masters and generals, their uniforms crisp, but their faces lined from sleepless nights. Guilliman took his place at the head, not upon a throne, but a plain, high-backed chair. Even so, he towered over all others. His eyes swept the assembly in a single, measured glance, a tactician's reading of a battlefield. In the set of jaws, the flicker of glances, the faint tightening of lips, he saw ambition, fear, and something far worse, doubt. Lord Admiral Halbrecht spoke first, his voice clipped, every syllable an unspoken challenge. Segmentum Solar demands priority supply. With the rift severing half the galaxy, Terra must be reinforced. Without the throne world, the Imperium falls at once. Martial neighbor of the Black Templars struck the table with a gauntleted fist. Segmentum Solar is a fortress already. It is the outer realms that burn. Shall we let the frontier worlds choke in darkness while Terra grows fat on its hoarded fleets? Murmurs rose like the first hiss of a firestorm. Fabricator General Kane's vox-augmented tones cut through them, calm but resonant with authority. Resource scarcity is not theoretical, Lord Marshal. The Crusade demands fuel, weapons, and fleet refit. Mars will provide these, but... Guilliman's eyes narrowed. He already knew what was coming. Only if the rights of technology are respected. The Mechanicus cannot and will not allow the recovery of Archaeotech to be mishandled by untrained Imperial hands. The value of these relics outweighs any single world. A ripple of reactions. Some nodded agreement. Others, especially the Astra Militarum commanders, muttered curses under their breath. It was Inquisitor Vera who spoke next, her words sharp as a scalpel. Your concerns are noted, Fabricator General. But let us speak plainly. No amount of shipyard output matters if heresy festers behind our lines. Even as we meet here, cults rise in liberated worlds. Entire planetary governors have refused to reaffirm their oaths to the throne. I propose the Crusade dedicate resources to purging dissent before we chase after lost worlds. Purge dissent? Neighbor's voice was a growl. Do you speak of cleansing with Bolter and Flamer the very people we claim to liberate? The council teetered toward open argument. Guilliman led them. Every raised voice told him more than any report could. Every clash of words revealed an alignment of loyalties, a measure of whose principles bent and whose would break. In his mind, he marked each name with silent symbols, allies, rivals, risks. He had learned this game long before the heresy, and the rules had not changed in 10,000 years. When the noise threatened to drown the room, Guilliman rose. He did not shout. He did not need to. His voice, calm but resonant, cut through the chamber like a drawn blade. Enough. You speak as if these choices are optional. They are not. The rift grows. Every day it claims more worlds. Every day we delay, another system dies alone in the dark. We will reinforce terror. We will secure the outer worlds. And we will purge heresy where we find it. This is not a council of competing empires. It is one Imperium, or it is nothing. The silence that followed was not agreement, but obedience. And Guilliman knew the difference. The holomap shifted, showing the first roots of the Indomitus Crusade, 3 great thrusts into the galaxy's fractured heart. Fleet Primus, under Guilliman's direct command, would spear into the Dark Imperium itself. Fleet Secundus and Fleet Tertius would fan out to relieve the severed sectors. The plan was daring, perhaps reckless, but anything less would mean bleeding to death in the shadows. As the council adjourned, some bowed with sincerity, others with formality only. Kane's optic lenses tracked Guilliman without blinking. Inquisitor Vera's eyes lingered too long, calculating. And in the shadowed corner of the chamber, a man in an officer's uniform slipped out without a word. Someone Guilliman did not remember authorizing to attend. He did not give chase. Not yet. The first battles of the Crusade would be fought with voidcraft and bolter fire. The second would be fought here, in council chambers, in whispered corridors, in the dark where knives found their mark. When Guilliman left the Strategium, the galaxy map still shimmered behind him, the rift glowing like a wound that would never close. He wondered, not for the first time, if it was truly the enemy without, or the rot within, that would end them. The first fleets departed Nemea under banners of fire. Battle barges and strike cruisers peeled away from the Macrage's honor like shards of a breaking crown, their engines flaring against the dark. Astropathic choirs keened as they bent their minds to the warp, carrying Guilliman's orders into the void. But not all his battles could be fought in the stars. 3 days into the voyage, the summons came. A convocation of the Ecclesiarchy aboard the Basilica-class cathedral ship Gloria in Excelsis. Guilliman had avoided this meeting as long as he could. Now, the demands had become insistent. The High Confessor himself had requested his presence. The Gloria was a fortress of faith adrift in the void. Kilometers of gilded spires, stained glass void shields, and bells the size of drop pods tolling in the artificial gravity. Statues of the Emperor, some serene, others wrathful, lined the docking bays. Each was worn smooth by the touch of 1,000,000 pilgrims. Inside the grand nave, thousands knelt in prayer, their voices rolling like a storm tide against the vaulted ceiling. The air was heavy with incense so thick it stung the eyes. Guilliman advanced through the crowd, flanked by his honor guard, the sea of faithful parting before him in awe and terror. At the altar stood High Confessor Halbrecht, robes of crimson and gold, Crozier's staff raised high. His voice was a thunderclap. Behold the son of the God Emperor, returned from the tomb of ages to lead us in his holy war. The nave erupted in cheers and chants of Ave Imperator. Guilliman stood still, jaw tight. He had heard such words before, 10,000 years ago, in a different age, from lips that did not call his father a god. When the noise fell enough for speech, Halbrecht turned to him. Lord Guilliman, we are blessed beyond measure, but the faith of the people falters. Worlds burn, and heretics whisper that the Emperor is not with us. We must answer them, not only with steel, but with fire. We ask, no, we implore, that you swear before all the faithful your eternal fealty to him as divine. The trap was laid. If he refused, the ecclesiarchy would whisper treason into every ear. If he agreed, he would bind himself to a lie he despised. He stepped forward, each footfall echoing in the nave. High Confessor, I swore my fealty to the Emperor before your ecclesiarchy was born. I serve him with every breath, but I do not serve lies. He was no god. He was a man, greater than any other, but still a man. To call him divine is to diminish him, and to make of his Imperium a prison of superstition. A wave of gasps swept the cathedral. Some clutched their icons as if to shield themselves from blasphemy. Others stared in shock, as if struck. Halbrecht's face darkened. You speak dangerous words, my lord. The people need faith, not truth. Without belief in his divinity, the Imperium will shatter. Then it was built on a weakness that must be burned away, Guilliman replied, his voice like stone. Faith without truth is just another chain. There was no applause, no cheers, only the hollow ringing of silence. Guilliman turned and left the nave, the honor guard falling in around him. Behind him, the prayers resumed, louder than before, as if the faithful were shouting down the doubts his words had planted. In the privacy of his quarters aboard the Macrage's honor, he knew the storm had already begun. The ecclesiarchy would not forgive this defiance, and when faith turns to wrath, it is a blade that cuts deeper than any Xenos weapon. The Macrage's honor slid through the warp like a blade through black water. Its Geller fields hummed with cage power, holding back the things that pressed too close to reality's skin. But for all the terrors of the Imperium, Guilliman's mind was in something far colder, far more human. The first betrayal had not yet struck, but he could feel it coming. Like the tension before a storm, the signs were subtle but unmissable. Orders arriving already altered from his original intent. Fleet captains who hesitated a moment too long before obeying. Vox channels that went suspiciously silent when he entered. And always the shadow of the ecclesiarchy, whispering their sermons into ears already inclined toward zealotry. The break came over the agri-world of Bellisar IV. It was meant to be a simple liberation. The world had fallen to chaos cults in the first wave of the Rift's expansion, its governor crucified above the hive gates. Intel suggested minimal enemy forces remained. The cult had fled with the warband that spawned it. Bellisar's people needed food, water, and medicine, not more war. But when Fleet Primus emerged from the warp, they found Gloria in Excelsis, already in low orbit, and with it, 3 battleships of the Segmentum Solar Defense Fleet. Guilliman was still in the Strategium when the High Confessor's voice came over the Vox link, unbidden, unannounced. Lord Guilliman, praise be, you have arrived in time to witness the Emperor's judgment. The people of Bellisar IV are tainted beyond redemption. Their grain-fed heretics. Their prayers were silent when they should have cried for deliverance. We enact his will upon them. The tactical display bloomed with crimson sigils. The ecclesiarchy's fleet had begun bombardment. Guilliman's gauntleted hand closed into a fist. You will cease fire immediately, he ordered. This world is under my authority. You will stand down or face censure. The Vox was silent for a beat too long. Then, with respect, Lord Guilliman, your authority is his authority, and the ecclesiarchy speaks for his will. We have no need of further orders. On the display, macro cannon shells punched through Bellisar's hive domes. Entire districts blossomed into fire. The Strategium became a storm of motion. Vox officers shouted, servitors processed threat calculations, honor guards stood ready. But Guilliman's focus narrowed to a single decision. He could fire on the Gloria. One salvo from the Macrage's honor would gut her, but the moment he did, it would not be a skirmish, it would be civil war. He did not fire. Not yet. Instead, he hailed the captain of the Defense Fleet's flagship, a mortal officer bound by the oaths of the Navy, not by the ecclesiarchy's pulpit. Captain Erastes, you are Imperial Navy, sworn to the throne. I am your Lord Commander. Cease bombardment, or I will consider you in rebellion. The reply came not from Erastes, but from an unfamiliar voice, smooth, precise, and utterly cold. Lord Guilliman, Captain Erastes has been relieved of duty for dereliction. I now command His Eternal Faith, under the authority of the Holy Synod. Bellisar will burn until no heretic breath remains. If you oppose us, you will share their fate. The connection cut. For a moment, the only sound in the Strategium was the distant thrum of the ship's heart. Guilliman could almost hear the chains tightening. This was no misunderstanding. This was the first open act of defiance. The ecclesiarchy had moved from whispers to action, and they had chosen their ground carefully, under the banner of piety, with a target so painted in suspicion that any protest could be painted as sympathy for heresy. Bellisar's surface burned for 13 hours. By the time the Gloria in Excelsis broke orbit, its oceans boiled black and its grain fields were ash. The aftermath was worse. Reports came in from worlds across Fleet Primus's path. Orders rescinded, relief fleets redirected, commanders removed and replaced with approved officers of faith. The ecclesiarchy was not simply undermining the crusade, they were carving their own crusade from within it. Guilliman stood alone in his quarters, armor still on, helm cradled under one arm. Outside the viewport, the warp swirled like a great patient predator. He had been here before, on Calth, on Macrage, on Terra itself. But this was no battlefield of armies and fortresses. This was the war he hated most, the war for the Imperium's soul. And he had just lost the first battle. The warp was never silent. It whispered secrets, promises, and lies. It clawed at the edges of reality, its tides carrying horrors no mind could fully comprehend. Guilliman knew this better than most. He had seen the shimmer of madness in the Imperium's depths, and yet he had no choice but to sail into its heart. As Fleet Primus regrouped beyond the shattered system of Bellisar, reports came in of a new menace stirring within the rift, something older than the heretic cults and darker than the ecclesiarchy's fanaticism. Shadows moved beneath the storm, creatures born of nightmare and flame, hungry for the souls of the living. The Macrage's honor shuddered under the weight of incoming intelligence. Astropaths screamed their warnings, and the navigators' eyes glowed faintly as they charted erratic warp currents. Guilliman's mind worked quickly, balancing the impossible calculus of threats without and within. In the War Council chamber, the mood was grim. Magi of the Mechanicus whispered of demon engines awakening in forgotten tombs. Inquisitors spoke of demon hosts massing beyond the rift's edge. The warp storms themselves grew more violent, strangling astropathic signals and devouring waypoints. And amidst it all, the ecclesiarchy's grip tightened like a noose. Guilliman paced slowly before the strategic display, his armor clinking softly. His thoughts returned to the choice he had postponed for so long. Crush the Ecclesiarchy's rebellion now, or risk losing the crusade entirely. If he struck at the faith too hard, he risked fracturing the Imperium's fragile unity. If he held back, the Ecclesiarchy might sabotage the war effort from within. His trusted advisor, Magos Dominus Cain, broke the silence. Lord Guilliman, the emerging warp threat demands immediate response. If we divert forces to internal purges, we risk losing entire sectors to the darkness. Inquisitor Vera, seated across the chamber, nodded sharply. The heresy festering within must be cleansed before it spreads like wildfire. Otherwise, there will be no Imperium left to save. Guilliman met her gaze steadily. And yet, every moment we delay the response to the demon threat costs lives. We stand on the knife's edge, between destruction by the enemy without and collapse from the enemy within. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the crushing weight of millennia pressing down upon him. The burden of immortality was a lonely one. Endless centuries to watch empires rise and fall, to see friends and foes turn to dust. We will divide our forces, he said at last. Fleet Primus will push forward into the rift, hunting the demon fleets and reclaiming lost worlds. Meanwhile, I will lead a strike against the Ecclesiarchy's rebellion in Segmentum Solar. A murmur rippled through the council. Some feared the split would weaken the crusade. Others saw no alternative. Guilliman continued, "We must strike swiftly and decisively. If we allow the Ecclesiarchy to continue undermining us, their zeal will become a cancer that consumes all." The days that followed were a blur of orders, counter-orders, and grim preparation. Guilliman personally oversaw the mustering of loyalist regiments, the arming of ships, and the marshalling of fleets for the coming civil war. Yet even as the wheels of war turned, shadows gathered in the warp. Psychic storms flared, and dark tendrils reached toward the material realm. The demon fleets advanced, carrying ruin and madness in their wake. One night, alone in his chambers, Guilliman's thoughts returned to the first battle lost at Bellisar. The cries of dying innocents echoed in his mind, mingling with the prayers that had turned to curses. He wondered if the Imperium's greatest enemy was not the darkness beyond the stars, but the fractures within its own heart. And in that moment, the storm broke. The war drums of the Indomitus Crusade echoed through the void like thunder rolling across storm-tossed skies. Fleets moved in jagged lines, breaching the boundaries of known space with resolute fury. The Cicatrix Maledictum, that vast scar upon the galaxy's flesh, writhed beneath their assault, an endless abyss that threatened to swallow worlds whole. Amid this cosmic tempest, Guilliman stood upon the bridge of the Macragge's honor, eyes fixed on the holomap flickering with endless red and black. Each blinking point marked a world either lost or yet to be reclaimed, each line a tenuous lifeline stretching into the void. Behind him, his captains and advisors debated strategy, their voices sharp but distant, mere echoes to the Primarch's mind, which churned with darker reflections. The war outside was only a mirror to the chaos roiling within the Imperium itself. Reports had arrived, whispers of mutiny on the fringes, commanders swayed by ecclesiarchy zealots, entire regiments torn between faith and duty. Guilliman's gaze fell upon a report from the Segmentum Obscurus. A fleet, once loyal, had turned its guns inward, firing upon allies rather than enemies. The Indomitus Crusade was fracturing, and the fractures threatened to swallow all hope whole. Guilliman's voice cut through the tension as he addressed his council. The warp roils with demonic corruption, but our greatest peril remains the enemy within. We will crush the heresy that festers in our ranks as ruthlessly as we strike at the Xenos and the traitors. Marshal Neighbor, his voice rough as gravel, grunted agreement. Let the heretics know the Black Templar's wrath. We burn corruption with holy fire. But Guilliman's eyes held a weary shadow. We must be more than warriors. We must be judges and shepherds alike. Every decision carries weight. The wrong blow could break what remains whole. The Primarch turned to Magos Kane, who had long advised him on the complexities of the Mechanicus's uneasy alliance with the ecclesiarchy. Kane, what of the machine cult? Will they stand with us or drift into schism? The Magos' servo arm tapped rhythmically against his data slate. Mars is fractious. The quest for lost technology emboldens radicals on both sides. Some seek to weaponize the very warp itself, while others denounce the Mechanicus as heretics for dealings with demonic forces. We walk a razor's edge. A low rumble shook the ship, the signal of incoming distress calls. Guilliman turned to the Vox operator. Report. Lord Commander, the mining world of Varkesh is under siege. Demonic forces have overwhelmed local defenses. Loyalist forces are holding, but reinforcements are delayed due to interdiction in the warp. Guilliman's jaw clenched. The war was not waiting. Every delay cost lives and worlds. Yet, every decision risked weakening his grasp on the fragile unity he struggled to maintain. In the quiet moments before the battle, Guilliman reflected on the nature of sacrifice. Millennia of war had taught him that victory was often born on the backs of unbearable loss. Immortality was a curse, a slow watching of everything loved crumble into dust. Yet the burden of command left no room for doubt. The Primarch raised his hand, and the War Council fell silent. We march into the storm. Our enemies are legion, both seen and unseen. But we fight for the memory of those who cannot fight, for the future of all humanity. Let no man or machine falter outside the viewport. Stars shimmered coldly against the infinite dark. The galaxy held its breath, and the Indomitus Crusade surged forward, into the gathering storm. The war had changed. No longer was it a battle of grand fleets and clear enemies, but a shadow war waged on fractured alliances and whispered treacheries. The rift's jagged maw swallowed entire systems, leaving only ruin and suspicion behind. The Indomitus Crusade pressed onward, but with every victory came new fractures. Alliances shattered, loyalties tested, and the true cost of immortality laid bare. Guilliman stood on the command deck of the Macrage's honor, the weight of his millennia pressing upon him like the cold void outside. His gaze rested on the holomap, where the flickering lights of contested worlds blinked like dying stars. A sharp buzz interrupted his thoughts. A message, encrypted and urgent. Lord Guilliman, a fleet from the Ultramarines' homeworld of Macrage has been ambushed near the Catan system. Survivors report betrayal from within. The fleet's commander was in league with the Ecclesiarchy's zealots. The Primarch's face hardened. Betrayal from within his own ranks, an echo of old wounds that never truly healed. In the War Council chamber, tensions flared. Chapter Master Varial of the Salamanders spoke with quiet fire. Such treachery threatens to unravel us all. The Ecclesiarchy's poison spreads like a blight. We must root out these traitors before the entire crusade collapses. But Captain Adrastos of the Raven Guard countered, his voice cold. Rooting out heresy is one thing, but suspicion breeds paranoia. We risk destroying our own in a frenzy of witch hunts. Guilliman raised a hand. Paranoia and betrayal are two sides of the same coin. We must be vigilant without losing our humanity. In the shadows, Inquisitor Vera watched silently, her eyes reflecting the flickering war map. Her loyalties were opaque. Friend or foe, none could say. She moved like a wraith, sowing doubt, pulling strings unseen. Meanwhile, far beyond the battle lines, whispers of a darker power stirred. An ancient entity awoken by the chaos, watching, waiting. Guilliman knew the greatest battle was not merely against Xenos or heretics, but against the fracturing soul of the Imperium itself. The ancient stars watched silently, indifferent to the machinations of mortal empires. Time itself seemed to fold upon the crumbling relics of forgotten civilizations scattered across the galaxy's edge. In the depths of this cosmic graveyard, Guilliman sought answers. Old truths buried beneath layers of dust and betrayal. The Macrage's honor had ventured beyond the rift's immediate chaos, following whispers of a forgotten vault world, Valaris Prime, once a beacon of knowledge and power before the age of strife. Here, amid the ruins, lay secrets that might turn the tide of war or doom the Imperium forever. Guilliman stood amidst the shattered columns of a once great cathedral, his armored feet stirring centuries of ash. His eyes traced the faded inscriptions, relics of a faith older and purer than the Ecclesiarchy's twisted dogma. Beside him, Magos Kane's mechadendrites traced arcane symbols, decoding data inscribed in dead languages. This world holds biotransference archives, lost technology capable of extending the lives of warriors without the torment of stasis or machine flesh. Such power could stabilize the Crusade's faltering legions. Guilliman's gaze darkened, or corrupt them beyond redemption. The weight of immortality pressed heavy upon him. He knew all too well the curse of endless life, the slow erosion of purpose, the fading of hope. These archives promised salvation or damnation. But before they could delve deeper, a cold alarm shattered the silence. The ruins trembled as warp-tainted storms surged overhead, twisting reality with their malevolent power. From the shadows emerged figures clad in dark robes, the Adeptus Mechanicus radicals, seeking the same prize with zealotry unhinged. Their leader, a tech priest of unholy fervor, stepped forward, eyes glowing with mad light. Lord Guilliman, your time is past. The new order shall rise from the ashes of this dying Imperium. A brief but brutal skirmish erupted, ancient weapons clashing with ceramite and power swords. The battle was not merely for territory, but for the soul of the Imperium's future. As the dust settled, Guilliman's forces held, but at a cost. The biotransference archives were damaged, their secrets partially lost again to time. In the aftermath, Guilliman pondered the fragile line between hope and ruin, salvation and despair. The past echoed like a warning. The rise of empires is always shadowed by their fall. Darkness was a veil that fell swiftly and silently, cloaking truths best left hidden. The Indomitus Crusade marched onward, but beneath the glint of shining armor and roaring engines, shadows twisted and writhed. Guilliman paced the chambers of the Macrage's honor, the weight of his centuries etched in every line of his face. Reports came like daggers. Loyalists turned traitors, whispers of collusion between ecclesiarchy zealots and dark powers in the warp. Inquisitor Vera's presence was a constant shadow. She moved through the corridors like a ghost, her motives inscrutable. Some whispered she played a deeper game, one that could unravel even Guilliman's iron will. A clandestine meeting convened deep within the ship's underdecks. Guilliman, flanked by Magos Kane and a select cadre of trusted officers, examined intercepted communications. The cipher revealed a plot to assassinate key commanders loyal to the Primarch. an attempt to cripple the Crusade's leadership from within. Guilliman's voice was cold steel. This is no mere conspiracy. It is a war waged in silence and blood. We must root out the vipers before they strike again. The hunt began. Trusted allies became suspects. Every whispered conversation, every secret meeting became potential treason. Yet Guilliman's own doubts gnawed at him. In his prolonged life, he had learned the cruel truth that betrayal often came from the deepest wells of loyalty. Love turned to obsession. Faith twisted into fanaticism. A revelation shattered his resolve. A close advisor, a friend since the early days of the Crusade, had been feeding information to the ecclesiarchy's zealots. The betrayal cut deep, not merely for its act, but for what it signified. The Imperium's greatest enemy was no longer just the Xenos or the warp, but the corrosion within. Guilliman clenched his fists, the weight of immortal years pressing upon his soul. To save the Imperium, sacrifices would be made, trust would be broken. The line between friend and foe blurred until only the cold light of duty remained. The veil of shadows thickened. The battle for the soul of humanity was no longer fought with bolter and blade, but with secrets, lies, and shattered faith. The air within the Macragge's honour felt heavier, as if the very ship absorbed the weight of Guilliman's burden. The fractures within the Crusade were no longer hidden in shadows. They had erupted into open wounds, bleeding distrust and fury. Guilliman moved through the corridors, once vibrant with purpose, now echoing with the hollow footsteps of those who questioned their loyalties. His armour, once a symbol of unyielding strength, now felt like a shackle forged from the sins of millennia. The revelation of his trusted advisor's treachery rippled through the ranks like a shockwave. The man had been a brother in arms, a confidant through centuries of war, now branded a traitor. A reminder that immortality did not grant immunity from betrayal. The High Confessor, the ecclesiarchy's iron fist within the Crusade, used this fracture to deepen the rift. His sermons grew more fervent, painting Guilliman as a man clinging to an outdated vision, a relic refusing to bend before the true will of the Emperor. In a council convened amidst the flickering glow of hololiths, voices clashed. The Primarch's hesitation costs lives, spat the High Confessor, his eyes burning with fanatic zeal. The Imperium demands purity and faith, not cold calculation. Captain Adrastos, voice low and bitter, retorted, "Blind zealotry will doom us. Strategy and unity must prevail, or we fall to ruin." Guilliman silenced the room with a raised hand. "We are bound by an oath to protect humanity. That oath is fractured, but not broken. We must heal it, or die divided." Yet even as he spoke, doubts gnawed at his resolve. Could the Imperium survive the collision of steel and faith? Could he, immortal yet weary, bridge the chasm growing between duty and devotion? In the quiet that followed, Guilliman found himself alone on the observation deck, gazing at the cold stars beyond. The galaxy was vast, but its endless expanse offered no comfort. "What is the price of an empire?" he murmured. "What does a god ask of his servants when loyalty shatters?" The Indomitus Crusade pressed onward, but its heart was broken, and Guilliman, burdened with the weight of eternal life, wondered if even he could mend the fractures before all was lost. The fires of war did not only consume worlds, they devoured the very bonds forged between men. Trust, once the foundation of the Indomitus Crusade, lay in ruins alongside shattered stars and broken hopes. Guilliman moved through the war room, the hum of machinery and distant gunfire a hollow symphony to his wearied soul. His gaze lingered on a datapad bearing grim reports, casualties mounting, fleet splintering, and a deeper rot spreading within the Crusade's ranks. The traitors' exposure had fractured the command structure. Loyalists eyed one another with suspicion, each fearing the next dagger hidden in shadow. The Ecclesiarchy's influence grew bolder, their zealots emboldened by chaos and mistrust. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Guilliman confided in Magos Kane. Every victory we claim seems to carve away a piece of what we fight for. Kane's mechadendrites tapped, thoughtfully. The Imperium's strength lies not in its arms alone, but in its unity. Fragmentation invites ruin, Guilliman's voice was heavy, and unity is the most fragile thing in existence. News came of a secret convoy carrying vital reinforcements and relics, ambushed by forces bearing the iconography of the Ecclesiarchy. The ambush was not just a tactical strike but a declaration. The war was no longer just against the Warp and Xenos, but against their own. The Primarch summoned his most trusted captains. We will hunt the traitors where they hide, but know this, the cost will be dear. Blood will stain not only our foes, but our own hands. The hunt began under the cold light of dying stars. Skirmishes erupted on barren moons and asteroid belts. Friends fell to friends, and every victory tasted of ash. Guilliman stood amidst the carnage, the faces of fallen warriors haunting his thoughts. Immortality granted him endless years, but no shield against grief. In the silent moments between battles, he pondered the cruel irony. The Imperium's greatest enemy was not the Warp's shadows, but the fractures born of fear and betrayal. The war raged on, relentless and merciless. The ashes of trust scattered across the stars, leaving only the harsh light of survival. Night fell over the vast expanse of the rift, not a gentle cloak, but a suffocating shroud that swallowed light and hope alike. The Macragge's honor drifted through the shadowed currents, its hull scarred and battered from relentless conflict, a beacon of defiance in a sea of despair. Guilliman stood alone on the observation deck, the stars before him cold and distant, silent witnesses to the Empire's unraveling. The weight of immortality pressed heavily upon his shoulders, the centuries of war etched into every line of his face and armor. Reports filtered in from the edges of the Crusade. Worlds lost, allies fallen, and whispers of treachery growing louder. The Ecclesiarchy's grasp tightened, its zealots fanning the flames of discord with sermons of fire and purity. Yet beyond even these mortal conflicts, the Warp itself stirred. Dark entities whispered promises of power and revenge, their voices curling like smoke around the minds of the weak. A sudden alert shattered the quiet. Lord Guilliman, a massive warp storm approaches. Sensors detect demon activity coalescing near the system of Kaelin's Rest. Guilliman's eyes narrowed. Kaelin's Rest was a vital strategic point, its loss a devastating blow to the Crusade's momentum. But more than that, it was a symbol, a fortress against the darkness. He summoned his commanders. We stand at the edge of night, where shadow and flame converge. Our enemy is not only the demons that prowl the Warp, but the fractures within our own ranks. We must hold this line, or all is lost. As the fleet prepared for the impending assault, Guilliman wrestled with his own doubts. Immortality had granted him endless years, but at what cost? Watching empires rise and fall, allies turn to enemies, and the eternal battle consume all hope. He turned from the viewport, the cold stars reflecting in his eyes. We fight not for glory, but for survival. For the countless souls who cannot fight, for a future that may never come. The storm was coming. The Indomitus Crusade braced itself for the darkness that threatened to swallow all. The skies above Kaelin's Rest burned with unnatural fire, crimson lightning tearing through the warp storm's roiling clouds like jagged blades. Below, the fortress world's defences blazed, a desperate beacon against the encroaching abyss. Guilliman stood atop the command dais within the battle chamber of the Macrage's honour, his armour gleaming dully beneath the harsh lights. Around him, the gathered commanders faced the grim truth. The coming battle was no mere skirmish, but a reckoning. The demon fleet surged like a tide of shadow and flame, twisting reality with every advance. But it was not only the enemy without that threatened the Imperium. The fractures within now threatened to shatter the crusade altogether. Reports arrived of insubordination and open defiance among loyalist ranks. The Ecclesiarchy's zealots had fomented revolt in key positions, turning brother against brother at the worst possible moment. Guilliman's voice cut through the chaos, cold and resolute. "We stand at the breaking point. Our resolve must be iron, our loyalty unshakable. For if we fall here, there is no hope left for humanity." Inquisitor Vera's presence was a dark shadow in the chamber, her eyes reflecting secrets none dared speak aloud. As the battle erupted, Guilliman led the charge personally, his power sword slicing through demonic flesh with the fury of millennia. Yet every victory was marred by the sting of betrayal, the cries of traitors echoing alongside the screams of the damned. Amidst the carnage, Guilliman faced a devastating revelation. A trusted captain had turned his blade against the Imperium, severing bonds forged in blood and war. The Primarch's heart, ancient and immortal, ached with a sorrow deeper than any wound. The price of immortality was laid bare, not only endless war, but endless loss. As the fortress teetered on the edge of collapse, Guilliman raised his voice above the fury. "This is our crucible. Our legacy will be forged in fire and sacrifice. Stand with me, or fall to oblivion." The battle raged, the fate of the Indomitus Crusade hanging by a thread, fragile, precious, and all-consuming. The final hours upon Kaelin's rest unfolded like the dying embers of a once blazing star, fragile and fading but fierce until the last breath. The fortress world was a crucible of fire and shadow, its skies rent by the clash of titanic forces locked in mortal embrace. Guilliman stood at the forefront of the battlefield, a living monument to endless war. His armour, battered and scorched, gleamed beneath the blood-red skies, an unyielding symbol of a legacy forged through millennia of sacrifice. Around him, the forces of the Indomitus Crusade fought with desperate fury. Loyalists and zealots alike, their swords and bolters singing the dirge of a dying age. Yet even amid such valour, fractures remained. Whispers of doubt carried on every gust of warp-tainted wind. The demon hordes surged relentlessly, twisted creatures of nightmare and flame, seeking to consume all hope and light. Guilliman's power sword blazed with ethereal fire, each strike a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. But it was not only the Xenos and demons that threatened the Imperium. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. The High Confessor's voice rang out from the rear lines, commanding fanatics to hold no quarter for traitors, yet his own forces teetered on the edge of mutiny. The Ecclesiarchy's zealotry, once a weapon against heresy, now threatened to shatter the very unity it sought to protect. In the midst of battle, Guilliman confronted the traitorous captain, who had turned his fleet against the crusade. Their duel was a tempest of steel and sorrow, brother against brother, loyalty torn asunder by ambition and despair. As the fortress's defences crumbled, Guilliman made a terrible choice, sacrificing a vital garrison to seal a warp breach that threatened to engulf the system. The decision weighed heavy, a cruel testament to the cost of leadership and immortality. The battlefield grew silent as the last demon fell, but the victory was hollow. Kaelin's rest was lost, scarred beyond repair, a monument to sacrifice and shattered dreams. Guilliman, standing amid the ruins, whispered a solemn vow. The Imperium endures, but at what price? The age of unity is fading, and a darker night approaches. We will rise again, but the scars of today will never heal. The Indomitus Crusade staggered forward, bloodied but unbroken, bound by a fate both glorious and tragic. The dying suns of a shattered system cast their final, fading light upon the remnants of a once mighty empire. The Indomitus Crusade had endured storms of flame and shadow, but now stood at the edge of oblivion, a monument to ambition, sacrifice, and inevitable decay. Guilliman, eternal and weary beyond measure, stood alone upon the bridge of the Macrage's honour. Around him, the stars whispered cold truths, indifferent to the fall of kings and empires. His armour, scarred by countless battles, bore the weight of millennia, an unyielding testament to duty and loss. He gazed upon the galaxy's vast expanse, a tapestry woven with light and darkness, hope and despair. The cost of immortality was no longer measured in victories, but in the endless watching of all he cherished slipping into ruin. Memories flooded his mind, faces of fallen brothers, shattered alliances, betrayals born from love and fear, worlds consumed by war's ravenous hunger. The Imperium was no longer a bastion of order, but a fragile dream teetering on the precipice of night. Guilliman's voice, heavy with sorrow and resolve, broke the silence. We sought to build a legacy eternal, to forge an empire that would stand beyond time. Yet, in our striving, we have become both saviors and destroyers, heroes and villains entwined. He placed a hand upon the ancient relic of the Emperor's decree, its cold surface a stark reminder of the sacrifices demanded by power and faith. The Indomitus Crusade may falter, but its spirit endures. For even in the darkest night, a single spark can ignite the dawn as the stars dimmed and the galaxy held its breath. Guilliman made a final vow, not of conquest or glory, but of vigilance and hope amidst the ruins. The wheel of fate turned inexorably onward, and the saga of the Imperium was far from over. The twilight of an era was not its end, but the prelude to a new dawn, scarred, uncertain, but alive.